And now, judges, please introduce yourselves.
Hello, everyone. My name is Scott Barnhart. I'll be serving as the Chief Judge today. I'm currently in Indianapolis, Indiana. I serve as the Chief Counsel and the Director of the Consumer Protection Division of the Indiana Attorney General's Office, which means that we're responsible for protecting consumers in Indiana. And I am a We the People alum, did this several years ago, so I understand where you're sitting. Look forward to hearing from you today. Thank you. Marsha, you're on mute.
Try it again. I'm Marsha Holland. I'm an attorney in Missoula, Montana. My legal career was spent in Alaska as a public defender, but now I teach at the law school here in Missoula, and I just finished doing 9 Zoom mock trials. So I'm very familiar with this format, and I'm really excited. I've been involved with We the People for 30 years, and it's one of the best programs I've ever discovered in terms of high school education. So I look forward to hearing from you.
Hello to you all. My name is Becca Steinhoff. I am in Casper, Wyoming. I am the Executive Director of the John P. L. Bogan Foundation. We are a private family foundation in the state that is very much engaged in funding civics education initiatives like this one. So my first connection to We the People came through this work across the state of Wyoming, but I am married to a We the People state champion. So very much looking forward to hearing from you today.
Thank you so much, judges. Well, good morning. We are Reno High's Unit 6. I am Mia Tolles, and I'll be attending the University of California, Davis.
I am Brock Clark, and I will be attending the University of Nevada.
I'm Ariane Landers, and I'll be attending Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. Our unit coach is Mr. Denny Martindale, and our teacher is Mr. Richard Clark.
All right, so I will read the question and give you time for your opening statement. We're doing question number 1 today of Unit 6. Thomas Hobbes noted that life in a state of nature is solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. How has the human condition changed over time? How has that change reflected in our expectations of government? Should principles of natural rights or classical republicanism guide the policy changes designed to improve the condition of all people? What are the most pressing domestic and global challenges facing Americans today and in the future? What policies can you suggest to address them? You may begin.
A good or healthy society is defined as one that permits man's highest purposes to emerge by satisfying all his prepotent needs. In 1943, psychologist Abraham Maslow published a seminal article, Maslow's Hierarchy of Needs, ranking physiological, safety, belonging, esteem, and self-actualization needs. This panel agrees in order for the government to fulfill the human condition, it must first help provide avenues of opportunity to satisfy the hierarchy. The human condition, as defined by philosopher Hannah Arendt, is all of the characteristics and key events that compose the essentials of human existence, such as birth, aspiration, conflict, and mortality.
The Constitution's preamble promises to protect the general welfare by aiming to improve the human condition and satisfy the first 2 needs of the hierarchy. Our physiological needs are satisfied in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 1, the taxation power of Congress, allowing for social security programs. The second need, safety, is fulfilled in Article 1, Section 8, Clauses 11 through 16, giving Congress the power to declare war and provide a militia. The Supreme Court case Loving versus Virginia in 1967 helps fulfill the need of belonging by allowing miscegenation, the legalization of interracial marriage. This was used as court precedent in Obergefell versus Hodges in 2015, legalizing same-sex marriage.
As society progressed, our expectation of government was that it would satisfy the needs of a more diverse population. The ratification of the 13th, 14th, 15th, and 19th Amendments encompasses the need of esteem by expanding legal status and representation. It is through the platform established in the Constitution that citizens have the ability to pursue the final need, self-actualization. Natural rights and classical republicanism influenced the founding fathers, shown in the Declaration of Independence through life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, ending with the promise to sacrifice their rights to civic virtue.
Natural rights philosophy stems from Thomas Hobbes' idea of man in a state of nature, using his own power for the preservation of himself. Supplemented by John Locke's fundamental rights, life, liberty, and property, he believed that the law of nature is the preservation of mankind. In 1963, the Supreme Court case, Gideon v. Wainwright, held that the 6th and 14th Amendments guarantee the right of legal counsel to anyone accused of a crime. In Summa Theologica, St. Thomas Aquinas wrote that when providing legal counsel, a lawyer must protect a client's natural rights when their liberty is threatened, providing due process and protecting the rights given through the hierarchy.
Classical republicanism aims to uphold civic virtue. Hobbes and Locke argued that the state has arisen out of a social contract, created by individuals who recognized that a sovereign power could safeguard them from a state of nature. One of President Biden's first executive order mandates masks on all federal properties. It is crucial for Americans to give up some of their personal freedoms to protect the general welfare, upholding the social contract. As the founders intended, we can utilize these philosophies to address today's most pressing challenges. Our biggest global issue, the coronavirus, has intensified our domestic issue, the disparity of Nevada's education funding. According to the Gwynn Center, a nonpartisan research institution, over a third of all funding for Nevada's public schools comes from gaming.
Without the tourism industry tax revenue, public schools are left without necessary funding, leading to an insufficient fulfillment of the hierarchy of needs. Nevada's Senate Bill 545 was passed to collect revenue tax on marijuana to go to schools. Taxation is a principle of classical republicanism, and the better appropriation of tax money will improve education funding. Additionally, through vaccination efforts and following World Health Organization recommendations, the world is improving the pandemic response. Federalist 51 states, "If men were angels, no government would be necessary. To prevent a state of nature, government is instituted among men to protect our natural rights and encourage civic virtue. Through this, our self-actualization can be achieved." Thank you.
Thank you. So I have a question for you. If you were the President of the United States right now, what would be one of the top 3 priorities you would have in terms of something facing the entire nation, and some thoughts about how to put something into effect that at least addresses that? Any of you can be president.
One of the current concerns I would have as President of the United States would be our ever-continuing homeless issue. We can see that right now there are over 500,000 homeless within America, and a third of those homeless have an addiction to either alcohol or drugs. We can see that right now there are 11,000 homeless shelters within the United States, but only 239 transitional housing centers. These transitional housing centers give the availability to supply for cognitive brain therapy, which is much more effective than any of the rehab that other homeless shelters provide. So implementing these kinds of transitional housing centers would be on my top list of priorities.
Thanks.
I would say that climate change is one of the top issues that we're facing as a nation. We can see especially that climate change is putting a lot of pressure on lower income communities. So my solution would be to follow those policies in the Green New Deal. Going carbon free by 2030 and creating these brand new jobs in sustainable energy will not only increase our global economy, but also provide jobs for all of our people.
Thanks.
As president, one of the biggest issues I would like to combat is working to stop the coronavirus on a global scale. We can see that just recently in the United States, we have reached 200 million vaccinations. However, the global average for vaccinations is significantly lower, with it being around four vaccinations being administered for every 100 people. And the virus and the repercussions of it will not end if we only try to vaccinate the people within the United States. So we need to make an effort to help third world countries and support vaccination efforts outside of our nation.
Thank you so much.
You used Maslow's hierarchy throughout your statement, and I appreciated that. I'm curious if you think that the United States should encourage or discourage trade with countries where the government doesn't uphold the same hierarchy for the conditions of their people.
I would argue that we have to take a role as a nation to condemn and put sanctions on countries that aren't acting properly. We can see most recently that the United States has declared the mass killings of the Uyghurs in China as extremely dangerous and unfair to democracy. So we can see that by putting sanctions on this country, we can further economically stimulate them to change their ways.
Additionally, we can see that as of this morning, the Biden administration acknowledged the Armenian genocide that happened over a century ago. This is absolutely crucial to implementing the hierarchy within other countries, because although, yes, it does hurt our relationship with Turkey when it comes to our diplomatic relationship, it does help us implement a hierarchy by showing the international world that we will not stand for humanitarian crises.
Ideally, it would be best if we were to condemn nations that did not follow the hierarchy and did not treat their peoples with giving them rights that they are entitled with birth. However, we can look to China, our biggest trade partner, who just in the last month, we have traded over $500 billion worth of goods with. If we were to completely cut off ties just because they do not follow the needs of the hierarchy and they do not give their citizens rights, it would in turn hurt our own citizens and hurt the needs that we have with food and shelter and employment, and end up hurting the needs of our own citizens because of the economic repercussions of doing that.
So aren't countries like Turkey and China entitled to their own sovereignty, right? They're national sovereigns, just like the United States is. Why are we in a position to tell them what's better than they are? Why should we do that?
So we can see that the United States has had a long history of trying to implement democracies within foreign countries. We can see this particularly with the implementation of the Marshall Plan after World War II. This actually winded up being a huge solution when it comes to implementing rule of law, especially in European countries. We can see that Denmark, according to World Justice Project, is now #1 in rule of law. So although, yes, these countries do have their own sovereignty because the United States of America is considered a global hegemony, has a way of helping implement further democracy within those countries, even if they do have their own sovereignty.
It also benefits us to have countries that treat their citizens with these needs of the hierarchy. As my colleague mentioned, Europe, after the rebuilding of Europe following World War II, many European countries such as Germany and France have become huge allies and huge trade partners with us, benefiting us.
Additionally, through the Roosevelt Corollary and the Monroe Doctrine, we've seen a history that helping other countries establish democracy is extremely important. And Roosevelt's 4 freedoms do prove that protecting the freedom of speech, the freedom of worship, and the freedom from want and fear helps the nation as a whole. And if we take a more Keynesian approach as an economist would, we're all dead in the end. It makes more sense to help out the world because we don't know in the long run what will happen.
So I have a slightly different question. Right now, there's a lot of conflict actually between federal decision-making and state decision-making, and actually a lot of difference between each of the states. How do you anticipate this is all going to resolve itself when there's a lot of pushing and pulling even within the United States? So, as we become a global world leader, how can we be a more effective national entity?
So when it comes to states versus the national government, we can see that under Article 10, that the state policing powers have actually become a very effective tool to help utilize domestic issues. We can see this through the court case of Jacobson v. Massachusetts, where under Article 10, the state policing powers have the availability to enforce vaccines or mask mandates, which in the overall long run winds up helping our domestic issues so we can become utilize ourselves and become a better international country.
Thanks.
And we can put this in perspective of the coronavirus. There was a push to push a federal mask mandate for all states across the nation. However, it did not go through because of this federalist divide in our country between states' rights and a federal power. So there needs to be a balance between the two of allowing state sovereignty, but also state or the federal government having power in order to protect the general welfare and the common good.
We can also see this divide between countries that prioritize natural rights and classical republicanism, where we can see that European countries favor classical republicanism and protecting the people as a whole. And we see they're not as focused on their GDP, but the happiness of their citizens. While us, on the other hand, we focus more on natural rights and classical, may I continue? on natural rights and increasing our GDP as a way to protect our natural rights.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Yes, well done. I see clapping. We'll give a few follow-up feedback and some comments. I thought you all did very, very well. Unit 6 is a hard unit to incorporate case law into, and I was really impressed by that in terms of, from that standpoint, you incorporated just the same way that you would in Unit 4, Unit 5. And so kudos to you on that. I would have liked to have seen a little bit more balance on kind of the other side, right? You are very passionate, very in your viewpoints on where you're coming from. I certainly understand that, and you're very articulate. I wrote down the quote, "We're all dead in the end," from a Keynesian view. And so from that standpoint, I would like to have seen, well, the other side would argue. And sometimes that's difficult in this class, in that format, because you don't believe it, but you need to understand and have a balanced approach, kind of say, well, the other view might be that, something along those lines. But overall, well done. You guys are very articulate and did a nice job.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
I'll just add a few comments. You had a really strong beginning. I mean, you really grabbed me as soon as you started your prepared remarks. And just like Scott had indicated, you wove philosophy and concepts in with cases, which, given the broad nature of this particular question this year, that's pretty masterful to be able to do that. One of the things, just great contemporary examples as well. I guess the one thing I would caution is, when I was looking at the question in the second bullet point, the first part is, what are the most pressing domestic and global challenges? And during your prepared remarks, you talked more about global challenges. That's why I asked my first question, because I knew you had information out there about, more domestic problems. And you came up with 3 really good examples: homelessness, climate change, and coronavirus. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I will round up the final set of comments here, and I'll start by acknowledging that this is my first time judging at the national level, and I am just so very impressed. So thank you for all of your preparation to get to this point. I would echo a lot of what has been said, and just add that there was strong coherence between your essay and then the responses that you gave to questions, and that shows us that you have prepared and that you know what's in this unit and across other units. And so it was great to see you connecting between the prepared remarks and then your responses. I too, and I'll say there's so much in this question actually that I wish you would have had more time in your original essay to keep answering. I found myself wondering a little bit more about that second bullet as well, both on the domestic challenges and then what might happen in the future. And so there were just a couple of things that I wish there would have been more time to address. I think you did get to some of those in your questions, so I was glad to see that all tied back. But overall, an exceptional job. Thank you to you and your teachers, and very well done.
Thank you so much, judges.
Thank you.